what's up for today? Yeah.
In this week's parsha, in verse 23, says this. Rashi says the she-donkey saw, but Bilam did not see. And then he says, for the Holy One blessed be He, granted permission to the animal to see more than the man could see. For as a result of the man having seen greater intelligence, he would go mad when he would see the harmful spirits. Then there's a super commentary mark. This is my question. It says, if man were capable of seeing into the world of the spirits, he would see both benevolent angels and harmful spirits. What is that talking about?
Yeah, so basically, just people keep asking me to repeat the question, so I'll repeat the basic part of the question. It was simply the issue of God opening up Bilam's eyes to see the angels of God, and there's just a note that if man's eyes were truly open to be able to perceive reality, they would see both benevolent spirits and malevolent. Yeah, well, basically that just means that in the world, the actions that we do create spiritual forces that are actually perceptible in some ways. You do mitzvos and ma'asim tovim, you create what are called angels of Kedusha. You do averos, you actually create demons or forces of impurity. So these things are surrounding us all the time. We're surrounded by good powers and negative powers that can affect us and affect the world in different ways, but they're at a frequency, so to speak, that the naked human eye does not perceive. But when one reaches certain levels of prophecy, or God opens up your eyes, so to speak, so you're then able to perceive certain things that you otherwise would not have been able to look at. Okay, so basically, good and evil forces are the angels or the demons that we create by our deeds. And we're surrounded by them all the time. Remember the Gemara in Brachos. Many of you, I think, learned the first parak of Brachos that has a whole discussion about demons. And now the emes is, the Rambam actually says there are no such thing. And it's all a mashal. That's the Rambam says that indeed. Now there's a famous Bir Hagra. The Vilna Gaon says on the Rambam, of course there are demons, and the Rambam is led astray by Greek philosophy that has to be rational and sensible. So the Rambam denies the existence of demons. Versteht sich, there are demons. So it's a famous thing that someone asked the Kutzker Rebbe, is the halacha like the Rambam that there are no demons, or is the halacha like the Gra that of course there are demons? So the Kutzker Rebbe said, the halacha is like the Gra that for sure there are demons, but once the Rambam says there are no demons, so the demons have to listen to the Rambam also. so they disappear. But whatever it is, that's a whole other discussion. But obviously the note that you're reading to me is presupposing that there are demonic forces as well as forces of Kedusha. So the Gemara in Brachos says, which talks about demons quite literally, says that you're surrounded by 1,000 on one side of you and 10,000 on the other side of you. And that's why your clothing wears off at the knees, right? You ever wonder why pants can be threadbare at the knees? Because the demons are rubbing against it. So the Gemara talks about, again, the Rambam will understand it symbolically, but the Gemara talks a lot about shadim, and it even gives you a way to see them. You can do a whole formula, a whole potion, and you can put it in a tube and look through the tube, and you can see them, but then, chas v'shalom, you don't want to see them. It could be a bad thing. But that I think that's what that's referring to. Yeah.
In the days of Ezra, was Tisha B'Av observed?
Very, very excellent. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the fast of the 9th of Av. Of course, we have the fast of the 17th of Tammuz, but let's talk about Tisha B'Av, which is the main fast other than Yom Kippur. So the idea that we will fast on the day of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, this is already dated from the Churban Bayis Rishon, meaning from the time that the first temple was destroyed, it was in Klal Yisrael a practice to fast on that day. And of course, Tisha B'Av was a day of tragedy even before the Churban Bayis Rishon, because that was the day, or that was the night, that the Jewish people cried over the report of the Meraglim, and it was decreed they would wander in the desert for 40 years. And what does the Gemara say? Hashem says to Bnei Yisrael, you are crying for no reason. This day will become a day of true crying, and the 9th of Av. So it's a davar pashut that they fasted by the Churban Bayis Rishon. The interesting question you're raising is, I assume when you mean by Ezra, when they, 70 years later, when they built the second Beis HaMikdash. that stood for 420 years, did they fast during the second Beis HaMikdash on the 9th of Av? After the Churban Bayis Sheni, of course they fasted. That's why we fast. But what about the 420 years of the Bayis Sheni? So the emes is, it's a very interesting question. The Perish HaMishnayos of the Rambam, to Maseches Rosh Hashanah, the Rambam says beferish that the fast of the 9th of Av existed even during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. The other fast days did not. They did not fast in Tammuz or Teves or Tzom Gedalia when there was a second Beis HaMikdash, but the 9th of Av they did, and there are different reasons that are given for that. One is that Tisha B'Av is a day of tragedy independent of the Churban Beis HaMikdash because of the Chet HaMeraglim. The other reason is that the second temple, even though we're rezocha to a second Beis HaMikdash, it did not have the Kedusha of the first Beis HaMikdash. So in a sense, we are still losing something. We didn't have prophecy. We didn't have the Aron HaKodesh, the Luchos. We didn't have the Urim V'Tumim, etc. So Memela, we are misabel. We are mourning during the Bayis Sheni for the lack of the Bayis Rishon. And a third reason, Rav Soloveitchik suggests, is it was known that the second temple would be destroyed eventually. We knew that. And we also knew it would be destroyed on the 9th of Av. We didn't know which year. We didn't know when on the 9th of, what year, but we knew that the 9th of Av would be the day of the Churban Bayis Sheni. So Rav Soloveitchik suggests the following. Rav Soloveitchik suggests that they did fast every Tisha B'Av during the Bayis Sheni, but not as avelus over the Churban, because why are you mourning if you have a temple, but as a prayer to Hashem that this shouldn't be the year of the Churban. So it actually had a different function, meaning when we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, we are fasting as mourning and grieving over the Churban. When we had a Beis HaMikdash, we were fasting so the shoe shouldn't fall from the other foot, so to speak, that every Tisha B'Av, there was a lot of fear and trepidation that this would be the day of the Churban. So whatever the reason, the Rambam does say beferish, they did fast on the 9th of Av, even during the days of the Bayis Sheni. Okay. Yeah.
So it used to be, and also now today, more so like that people would wear tefillin all day. How come then, if it was a custom to wear tefillin all day, and really one should wear tefillin all day, how come on Rosh Chodesh we have Mussaf, we're instructed to take the tefillin off from Mussaf?
Yes, so the question that was raised is that according to the halacha, it is most proper that one should wear tefillin the entire day. People like the Vilna Gaon did it. And today we don't do that because we're not capable necessarily of the proper kavana, so we only keep it for davening. But still, we should logically wear it as long as we could. So even if I'm not going to wear it all day, so how come on Rosh Chodesh do I take off my tefillin before Mussaf? Yeah, it's a very excellent question. The short answer would be the following. We know we don't wear tefillin on a Yom Tov, Shabbos or Yom Tov, we don't wear tefillin. Now, Rosh Chodesh is not really a Yom Tov in the sense that you're allowed to do work, etc., but it does have the status of Yom Tov because, in some ways, because there's a special Mussaf offering, and therefore that makes it kind of a festive day. So since the Mussaf is the aspect of Rosh Chodesh that is comparable to Yom Tov, so therefore when we daven Mussaf, we do it without tefillin to kind of show that Rosh Chodesh is like a Yom Tov in that limited respect. So that's why we take it off before. Now some people have the minhag, they take it off before Hillel, which is interesting because Hillel too is connected to Yom Tov. Others will wait until, like our minhag is we wait until Mussaf. Yeah.
For a healthy Ben Torah, is a focus on the self-esteem bedieved, or in light of the humility one is supposed to strive for?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you clearly. I heard for a healthy Ben Torah.
Ben Torah,
Yeah.
should you have, is self-esteem bedieved, or should you really be looking for humility?
Okay, so if a person wants to be a healthy Ben Torah, so people say you need self-esteem, but is self-esteem kind of like a bedieved thing, but optimally I should strive for absolute humility, or is a self-esteem notion even a lechatchila? That's a very, very hard question. Theoretically, one might say that absolute humility is the highest virtue. So if you're talking about a person who is capable of that highest virtue, that would be a beautiful thing. That would be like Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the most humble of all people. But as a practical question, I would have to say that self-esteem is absolutely necessary, because for most of us, if we simply get rid of our egos entirely, we get depressed, we feel helpless, we feel hopeless, we get despondent, and therefore in many, many ways you will be destroying yourself unless you have a sense of your chashivas, a sense of your worth, a sense of your value. So therefore I would have to say that, let me put it this way, in order to remain a healthy Ben Torah, you have to have a good dose of self-esteem. In other words, if you start off healthy and you try to destroy that self-esteem, you're going to become unhealthy in that way. Now, you see the logic here. I mean, the logic here is very, very simple. If I really, really think I am a nothing, if I think I am a nothing, then why would my learning matter? Why would my davening matter? I might even say, this is kind of a new excuse you can tell your Rebbe if you don't come to Chakras. He says, why didn't you come to Minyan today? You say, who am I to pray to Hashem? Who do I think I am? I miss Seder. He says, I have the right to learn Hashem's Torah? I mean, you see where you're going with this. Meaning to say, your whole avodah becomes worthless to you unless you think you're significant. So a person has to know that they matter to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A person has to know I make a difference. Now, the sakana is, of course, if I focus too much on how important I am, that could lead me, God forbid, to gaiva. So this is the famous statement. Everyone knows the famous statement of Rabbunim V'Prashishcha. I quote it many, many times, and I know you've heard it many times, that you have to have two ideas in your two pockets. In one pocket, Anochi Afar V'Yefer, I am dust and ashes. I am nothing. I am worthless. Yeah, I got to know that. Without Hashem, I'm a zero. In the other pocket, Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam. Because of me, the world was created. Hashem made many, many different types of animals, but only one man and only one woman, so that every single man and every single woman says, the whole universe is here just because of me. That I make a difference. I matter. I mentioned before, Rav Yerucham of Mir, the great Rav Yerucham Levovitz, the great Mashgiach of Mir, said that if a person does not recognize their chesroinus, I think I'm perfect, that's a foolish person. That's kind of a dumb person. But if I don't recognize my greatness, that's a tragic person, because I'll never know the kalim, the utensils that Hashem gave me to be able to accomplish what's in my life. So you try to have both at the same time, humility, and at the same time recognize your kochos and use your kochos in a good way. It's a bit of a challenge, but that's the idea of the contradiction that you have to carry with you. So I think if one works too much on humility, then sometimes it might be destructive in the long run. So I would not necessarily put a lot of focus on it. On the other hand, if you have gaiva, you work on minimizing the gaiva, but not at the expense of recognizing your kochas. Yeah.
If we have to be smiach b'chalkei, then how can we daven for more?
Yeah, so the question is, Pirkei Avos tells us, Ezeu Asher, who is a wealthy person, hasamech b'chelko, that you are happy, you are content, you are joyous with whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you. I should be happy, samech b'chelkei. So l'chayra samech b'chelkei means I don't want more. So the question becomes, so how can I daven for more? Right? When I daven for more, what I'm telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, I'm not so happy with what I have, I'd like to have more. A very excellent question. Now, let me just first add a little point, which is not your question directly, but I want to add this point, that the Meforshim actually say, samech b'chelkei is only in gashmius, it's only in material things, It's not in ruchnius. In other words, sameach b'chelkai. If I have money, I shouldn't necessarily want more money, more houses, more that. But when it comes to serving Hashem, when it comes to Torah learning, when it comes to mitzvos, then for character, I shouldn't be, like let's say a person only learns a half an hour a day. He says, I'm sameach b'chelkai, it's enough, I'm happy with what I do. That's not good, right? You should want more and more and more. So that's one thing. Sameach b'chelkai is mainly in gashmius, material things. It is not in ruchnius. But even in ruchnius, it has a place, because I try to grow and I try to be better, but I also accept my limitations in the sense of not being jealous of other people, meaning I do my best, and I'm sameach in what God gave me without looking at other people. Okay, but back to your question, okay, so if at least in Gashmius, physicality, materialism, I am supposed to be sameach b'chelkai, so what is the purpose of davening? It's an excellent question, and ideally, that's why Rav Chaim Volozhiner says, a person's tefillas should primarily be focused on the glory of Hashem, and it shouldn't necessarily be focused on you. But that's a very, very high level. But I think what's going on is this. Let me tell you what the problem is. The Gemara in Yevamah says the following. Why were the imahot barren? Why did God make Sarah Imenu barren for so many years? Rivka was barren, right, etc. Why are the imais akares? So it says, because Hashem loved and cherished their tefillas, so Hashem made them barren so they would turn to Him to tefillah. Now, let's imagine this scenario. Sarah Imenu is 85 years old. She hasn't had a child for all these years. 86, 87, because she had their first child at 90. What if she would have said, like your question suggests, she would have said, I wanted a child, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not give me a child, and I'm very old. Gamzu l'tova, I accept Hashem, I am sameach b'chelkai, I rejoice in my chelek. So we would look at this woman and we would say, what a tzaddikas, how righteous she is. Baruch Hashem, it's so hard for a person not to have a child, but she accepts it out of love. You know what Hashem would be doing at that moment? I mean, Kavyacha, I'm going to use a physical image. He would be ripping his hair out. He says, she's missing the whole point. The whole point was I put her in the Mussaf, so she should daven to me. So now she's going to say, Gamzu l'tova, sameach b'chelko, I'm not going to daven? So here is where things get very, very strange. If Hashem put us in a Mussaf where I feel pain, I feel deprivation, sometimes that is a siman that God is telling me, turn to me, talk to me, ask me. Now, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a siman. I should train myself to be makabel. And really, this is one of the most difficult questions to answer in life. When I face adversity, hardship, deprivation, when is my attitude? I accept it with love and I rejoice in what God has given me? Or when do I say, lehepech, Hashem gave this to me so I would daven to Him? Right? We call it plan A, plan B. When do you transition? So I've mentioned before, since I've been doing this so long, almost anything I say I've mentioned before, someplace. But a story with Yaakov Kamenetsky, a very interesting story, that there was a child who had a very, very serious illness from family, and the parents took the child all over the world for medical treatment, and also to different rabbis and rabbis for brachos and everything else. And this went on like for 5 years. And they finally get to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. And they tell Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky the entire story. And he then asks them, do you have other children? And they say, yeah. He says, are your other children healthy? He says, yeah. He says, may Hashem give you a bracha from your other children. In other words, he basically was telling this family, this one's going to die. It's kind of, stop going around with him. So people were and the child, died shortly thereafter. Now, people were very shocked. Rav Yaakov was, of course, a great gadol b'Torah, but Rav Yaakov was also a man of extreme sensitivity. He would never say anything that would hurt a person in any possible way. So people were a little surprised that Rav Yaakov was just telling these parents are looking for hope. They're looking for hope, and he simply said, "Oh, the kid's going to die. Forget about him. Think about the other kids." But the parents actually said later, they were very, very grateful to Rav Yaakov, because all the years their child was ill, they were davening, they were looking for refuah, they were engaged in ishtadlus. The kid was being moved from place to place to place. He wasn't with his siblings. He wasn't with his friends. There was always another thing to do, another place to go. And Rav Yaakov was telling them, the time has come for a different avodah. Until now, your avodah was to daven, to be mishtadel, whether medically, spiritually. Now, we move to plan B. Plan B is to understand. Now is the time of Gamzula Tova. Now, the parents said, this was remarkable because this meant they brought their child home. He spent his last few months with his siblings, with his friends, in his room, with his teddy bears, or whatever it would be. And he was able to leave the world surrounded by the family that loved him in kind of a relaxed state of calmness and the like. But how does a parent know, right? How do you know when you move from A to B? Very, very difficult. Now, there are people, again, this is actually a big machlokas. There are people, particularly in Eretz Israel, who tell you that davening never stops. Daven, and work for refuah no matter what. But at least the Litvish tradition was that there is kind of a boundary. And Rav Yaakov basically says that it's based on derech hateva versus miracle, meaning if every derech hateva has been exhausted, and now you need a miracle, we don't pray for miracles. Sometimes Hashem does miracles, but we don't pray for miracles. Once you're confronted with something that needs a miracle, there's a gamzula tova aspect to it. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. I mean, your question is a very good question. It's a very hard question. It's hard. I don't mean intellectually hard necessarily, but very hard emotionally to know when you transition. Now, the other thing I want to say, though, is that on some level that's even harder to describe. You live with both modalities at once. Now, it's almost impossible to describe that, meaning I feel that I need something I don't have. But I also say, but I rejoice in what Hashem gave me at the same time. Almost contradictory. So they actually coexist. So it's something to think about. When do you move from tefillah to acceptance? And when do you say, no, I'm still going to rip the heavens? It's a hard question. Yeah.
Certain times in history we find that the Gedolim of Yisrael, let's say one of the derech, let's say by HaRav or Yeshiva and Gadol, and certain times, let's say by the Rambam, Yisrael made the wrong judgment about it. So how?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear with the Rambam what?
Let's say by the Rambam,
Yeah.
Yisrael decided the Rambam was wrong, but he was really right. So how would we be able to navigate such a situation when it comes to the Gedolim to decide who's right and who's wrong?
Yeah. So the question becomes that we do find throughout Jewish history that sometimes even very, very great people made certain decisions. We would call them Gedolim even. And then later it turns out these were wrong decisions, etc., which means even Gedolim, sometimes the decisions are proven to be wrong. Kairach himself was a good example. Kairach was a very, very chashuv person. In fact, there's a mice that's brought down that somebody was a gilgal of someone from the Dor HaMidbar who actually was around during Kairach's rebellion. So somebody asked, I don't know why they picked this Badafka to talk about. There's so many things in the Midbar you could ask about. But they asked about, how was it with Kairach? What was going on there? So the person said, this is how the story goes, said, he had some very good tightness. We really were on the fence. We actually, listen, the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu had to call on Hashem to do this great miracle obviously means that Kairach was making inroads. It wasn't just the 250 people, meaning a lot of people were on the fence. They didn't know where to go, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to do a miraculous thing. So the question is, how do you know? The answer is, unfortunately, you don't know. But like the Gemara says, like Rava says, by Psak Halacha, Ein l'dayan ela ma she'ein of rayos. A judge can only follow what his eyes see. You have to make the best judgment you can. Now, this is part of why Pirkei Avos tells everybody, Aseh l'HaRav, you have to have a Rebbe that you're makasher yourself to. You follow the Rebbe's hadracha. The Rebbe might be wrong, might be right. You may not know. But when there's a machlokes in Klal Yisrael, you have to have someone that you turn to help you navigate these things. Now, how does the rabbi know where to go? This is always the constant frustration I have. Sometimes you get shilas, so you look up in Sifrei Halacha, so it'll give you the different shitas, and then it'll say, ask a competent. You have to ask a Miriam Ahuva or HaRav for the answer. Well, I tell you, that's not so helpful if your job is to be a Rav or a Miriam Ahuva. Right? Ask a competent rabbi. Okay, I guess I'm not a competent rabbi. Rabbi I am, but not necessarily competent. So the truth of the matter is it's going to be very confusing, very, very confusing. On the other hand, it doesn't happen necessarily that often, meaning often among Gedolei Yisrael, there will usually be a haskama, a broad-based haskama, maybe not on pratim, but on general guidelines. So the issue you're raising is a difficult issue, but Baruch Hashem, it's not an issue that we face all the time. For example, well, maybe this is a bad example. This may be an example. I was going to give an example as B'nai Torah going into the army. So I was going to say, that's a davar pasha that the Gedolei Yisrael are against it. But okay, the truth is maybe that's a bad example, because that gufa may be a subject of at least privately, some disagreements about how to work that out. But that might be an example of a difficult issue of what mahalach you follow. But again, this is where you're makasher yourself to a Rebbe. Everyone has to have a Rebbe. The Rebbe has to have a Rebbe. I can tell you this, if any of you ever want to become Rabbanim, let's say, not that I'm recommending it necessarily, but if you want to become Rabbanim, so you interview in a shul, a frum shul. So I can guarantee you the two questions you will be asked in an interview in an American Orthodox shul is, number one, what is your position on Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut? And then you're wondering, what do they want me to say? This and that. Okay. The second question is, who do you ask your shilas to? Now, the first question is more political, but the second question has a lot of teichen, because every person has to have a Rebbe. Even Gedolim have a Rebbe, but usually the Rebbe are not alive anymore. But a Gadol asks himself, what would my Rebbe say? How would my Rebbe approach it? A Talmud of the Chafetz Chaim would have a picture of the Chafetz Chaim, I don't mean a physical picture, but an image of the Chafetz Chaim in front of them. And they would try to figure out, if I could ask the Chafetz Chaim, what would he tell me? So that's how you try to navigate it. But, if you're asking me, is there a formula to avoid confusion? Unfortunately, there is not. One outstanding example, let me give you an example later than Karech, but much earlier than the Rambam, was by the Churban Beis HaMikdash. This is the Gemara in Gittin that people learn on Tisha B'Av, in the 5th parak of Gittin, Hanizaken, where Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai got smuggled out of Yerushalayim because there were zealots who wanted to wage war against the Romans, and he was against it. He thought that was not a good thing. So he finally gets smuggled out as a dead body, and he leaves his coffin, and he goes to Aspasionis, who is the general who actually became emperor right then. Aspasionis, Vespasian is the Roman name. And Vespasian, he says, he makes peace with Vespasian, and Vespasian asks him, whatever you want, ask me. And Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for 3 things. He said to spare the Chachamim who would go to Yavne, don't destroy the Chachamim, and he said preserve the family of Rabban Gamliel, who's the Nasi, and he wanted a special medical treatment for Rav Tzadik. Rav Tzadik was a Tana who fasted 40 years so there shouldn't be a churban. He would eat a little bit at night, but as a result, his digestive system was totally makulkal, and he needed special medical treatment. And Aspasionis gave Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai all of those things. So the Gemara then quotes a pasuk, an amazing pasuk, that says that Meishiv Chachamim Achor. Sometimes God causes the Chachamim to go backwards, to make mistakes. Daita misakel. He makes them foolish. Because why didn't Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai ask to spare the Beis HaMikdash? Vespasian said, ask me whatever you want me to ask. And the Gemara describes that as sometimes at critical moments, Hashem withholds chachma from the chachamim. So there would be midas hadin. So the pashtus of the Gemara is Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai actually made a big mistake. He made a big mistake because it was the Ratzon Hashem to be machor of the bias. Now, the Gemara then backtracks on that and says, well, maybe it wasn't a mistake. He held tafasta meruba like tafasta. If he would have asked for too much, if he would have asked for everything, he wouldn't have gotten it. But the Meishav Chachamim Achor does indicate there are times when Hashem withholds chachma, even from Gedolim, in order to carry out a predetermined plan. Was that true in the Holocaust, right? When there were Gedolim who said, don't go to Eretz Israel, don't go to America, because your kids will become off the derech, and instead they got killed in Europe. Was that a mistake? Was that a mistake? Or fakert? Fakert. It's painful to say this. Was it better to die in the Holocaust than to come to America and probably not be religious? Right? A lot of people like to say, oh, the Gedolim made a big mistake. Well, one answer is maybe they did, because the Gemara says, at times of din, the chachma is withheld from them. Or maybe they didn't, because this is the shikol. Better to have, I hate to even say the words, but there is a cheshvan. God forbid, you can't, sometimes fundamentalist Christians, will kill their children if they feel their children are going off their derech. Chas v'shalom, we don't advocate killing your child. But in terms of Hashem, maybe better dead than to be, reject Judaism. I don't know. So the point is this. Can Gedolim make a mistake? Yeah. Can they be wrong? Yeah. But here's the thing. Am I a person that can sit in judgment on their decisions? I think not. Meaning they may be wrong, but why would my judgment be able to determine if they're wrong? So that's where you need to also have the anova of understanding that they're much, much greater than we are. Yeah.
Does God have a sense of humor?
Did the Vilna Gaon have a sense of humor?
God, Hashem.
Oh, does God have a sense of humor? I often tell my wife when different things happen that God does have a sense of humor, but I don't know if I can conclusively prove it. Again, the idea of first of all, what is a sense of humor is not such an easy thing to describe. Sigmund Freud, who was Jewish, although not religious, but he did come from a long line of rabbis until his own father, they were like unbroken rabbanim, actually wrote a whole book on what makes jokes funny. This was part of his psychological studies, like what is humor, what makes something funny. But if laughter is generated by the unexpected, by the surprise, by sudden turns of events that you don't expect, and you see something that is, I didn't see it coming, then in that sense, God does have a sense of humor, in the sense that we often see his hashgacha pratis by unlikely things that look like coincidence. For example, you can look at the Book of Esther. Now, I'm not sure if the Book of Esther is a comedy in the sense that makes us, we might laugh out of happiness, but not out of, humor per se. But there's also sort of irony here, where in the middle of Haman, at his highest, all of a sudden everything turns around. So, in that sense, there is a sense of irony, a sense of humor, a sense of things happening that you would not expect. So I think in that sense, God does have a sense of humor. In some ways, the attempted assassination of Trump a few days ago there's something humorous about it. Like, everything. You see, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashgacha. Like, they tried to destroy Trump by taking away his money with the New York trial. And then they tried to destroy Trump by getting him convicted for something which he might go to jail for. And then they tried to take his life, by killing him. And then the Supreme Court kind of says he can't be tried for this and he can't be tried for that. And the assassination now makes him a hero. And now he becomes like a martyr to the cause. And he raises, you see this photograph will get raising his fist with a bloodied shirt, and the American flag is bedieved, in the background. That picture is going to, whatever was the Pulitzer Prize, it's going to win an award for a photograph, for sure. So what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's kind of something funny, humorous about it, in the sense that we try to do, we, meaning human beings, try to do all sorts of things. And no matter what you try to do, it always comes out the other way. So that's kind of you can call that's part of what a sense of humor is: the incongruous, the surprise, the thing you didn't expect. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that a lot, and that's one of the ways we recognize hashgacha pratis in the world. Now, the truth is, even when things are normal, so to speak, Hashem is doing it all, but it's normal, so we don't see it. When you have these unusual things, you see the hashgacha of Hashem in that way. Yeah.
Why do European Jews have European names, but Sephardi Jews tend to have more Hebrewish names?
Yeah, why do European Jews have, what names did you say?
Yeah, like Horowitz or
Like what?
Goldschmidt or Goldstein, or these, they sound much more European than a lot of the Sephardi names would be more Hebrewized. Fair generalization.
Well, okay, first a little history about Jewish last names. Obviously anyone who learns Tanakh and, or Gemara, Rishonim, know that nobody really has last names, right? You're Avram, Yitzchak ben Avram, Yaakov, etc. There's no last name. There's no Shem Mishpacha. So last names kind of were required. They go back more or less, I don't have the exact dates, but to the 1600s, 1700s, where in Poland and Russia, the Tsar required that families get certain names, as it were, and the names were sometimes chosen by the families, and sometimes were given by the government itself. And the names were in the local language. So a Goldschmidt basically means a goldsmith, right? Goldsmith and Goldschmidt are the same. Goldsmith is an anglicized version of Goldschmidt, which is German. We have Polish names, you have Russian names. Some names are very chashuv names. Other names, which are Katzenellenbogen, for example, which is a very prestigious Jewish family, but that means cat's elbows. It was given as a derogatory name. So they were really required by the government. Now, when Sephardim took up last names, I don't know, because it may have been even later. But I think that the issue there was that since Sephardim lived in Arabic cultures, so Arabic and Hebrew are very closely related languages. Not as close as Aramaic. Aramaic and Hebrew are much, much closer, but Arabic and Hebrew are also related. So, for example, Salam Aleichem in Arabic is Shalom Aleichem. Madrasa is a study hall, a school, Beis Medrash, madrasa, things like that. So given the fact that names for Sephardim were given in Islamic countries, it would be more connected to Arabic, which in turn is much closer to Hebrew, than the Ashkenazi names, which were German, Polish, and Russian, which were less connected to Hebrew. That probably would be the difference. Yeah.
This is a mitzvah that we should take care of our health. But how should, once I've done that, how should I view my relationship with food? On the one hand, I don't want to be a monk that only eats rice, fills that, if I'm healthy. And I also don't want to be like a glutton who's like eating foie gras every night for dinner. So
Yeah, a relationship to food. This is a very, very tricky thing. You know, a relationship to food is very complicated because it is said that this is the one addiction that you cannot go cold turkey for. Meaning to say, a person could, it's hard work, but I could stop smoking, I could stop drinking, and that way I separate myself from that taiva, and it no longer bothers me after a while. But if one is too connected to eating, you know, you can't stop it. You gotta do it. So it's a difficult avodah. So the Rambam writes. The Rambam, of course, was a doctor, and the Rambam writes that your relationship to food is you eat in a way that will maximize your health. That's what he actually says. He says, "I understand." In other words, the Rambam makes the point, as you know, an obvious point, but he makes the point that a healthy body is one of the things that helps a person in avodas Hashem. Because when I'm sick, when I'm not well, it's very difficult to daven with kavanah. It's difficult to learn. And therefore, I have to preserve my guf to the best of my ability because that is the means by which I get to serve Hashem. And he then makes a very interesting point. He says, good health is important, but it's important as a means, not an end. He who worships health as a goal is just as bad as the glutton, meaning to say, health can be a gluttony as well. The people who want to jog 6 hours a day or just become big bodybuilders or whatever it is. See, we like to think, the glutton who eats all day, that's an inferior person. But the one who exercises 12 hours a day, that's a disciplined person. The Rambam says, no, they're both gluttons. One is a glutton for food and one is a glutton for exercise. Ma'ishna. But when you exercise and you eat in order to maximize your health, then the exercise and the eating becomes a part of your avodas Hashem. So the point is bedavka, not to live on rice or whatever it is, but you try to structure things that maximize your health. Now, the question then becomes, so is there room for, theoretically, you could be healthy with tasteless food that has no taste at all, it could just be mush. Is there some inyan to look for things that taste good, that I like, etc., within the confines of health? So, once again, at the highest level, if you're literally only eating to keep yourself healthy, then you should not be concerned with health. But that's a very, very high level. I was just reading about a certain Tzadik in Yerushalayim that every night he would eat chicken soup, but he would pour into the chicken soup a glass of soda, which kind of makes it disgusting. But he said, I want it to be disgusting because I'm eating it for health. I'm not eating it for taste, so I want to ruin the taste. Putting aside, of course, the soda itself is not so healthy, but he wasn't going in that direction. But I think the Chovos HaLevavos suggests another approach. The Chovos HaLevavos actually says that Hashem put color in the world and Hashem put taste in the world, just as Hashem put music in the world, because he wanted to give us pleasure. And one should take pleasure in the good, nice things that Hashem put into the world in order that you should feel gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So instead of kind of creating the life where I'm so minimalist that I don't notice colors, and I don't notice taste, and I don't notice textures, I should have some connection to these things, at least in a moderation, because that is a way that enhances my hakaras hatov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the most important point is health. The Rambam says, if a person understands that the goal of eating and drinking is the preservation of health, he would never, this is a high madrega, he would never conceive of eating something that's not healthy. It wouldn't be shaykh, it wouldn't be shaykh whatsoever. Okay, so that's, if you're asking me what an ultimate goal is, that would be the ultimate goal. Use your achila in avodas Hashem. Yeah.
It may also be nogia to the Chovos HaLevavos, but I was wondering, how does one balance the concept of hakaras hatov people when really we should be showing hakaras, we should recognize that everything comes from Hashem and we should be thanking the messengers on one side, but also avoiding the bad bit of ingratitude. When somebody does your toiv and you just ignore them and you think thanks Hashem and you walk away from them. It's disgusting. How do you balance these two concepts?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. On one hand, the Chovos HaLevavos says, another Chovos HaLevavos says a very famous passage, that no human being can benefit me or harm me without HaKadosh Baruch Hu's decree. So if somebody kills me, somebody beats me, someone hurts me, someone steals from me, he didn't do it. He had no power to do it. Hashem decreed that I would suffer that thing. Somebody gives me money, somebody gives me a gift, somebody gives me a promotion. He didn't do it. Hashem decreed that it would happen. Now, not everybody agrees with the Chovos HaLevavos, but this is his sheet. His sheet is nothing happens to you without Hashem's gezerah, and no human being can help you, and no human being can help you. It all comes from Hashem. So the obvious question is this. I'm just repeating your question. The obvious question is, so number one, how could I be angry at the Russia for hurting me? The guy hurts me, but he didn't hurt me. It was God. No, Hitler didn't kill 6 million Jews. Hashem decreed that they would die. So number one, why am I angry at him? And number two, the opposite. Why should I be grateful to you for doing something good to me? He says, you didn't do it. Hashem did it. You're just the shaliach. You're like the box. You're like the package. What am I grateful to the postage stamp because it got the letter here? So the short answer is the key answer to this is the idea of bechira, free will, and that is to say the following: whatever thing you got, for good or for bad, is from Hashem. It's not from any human being, but each individual human being made a choice of what he wanted to do. So Hashem will then use him to be the delivery system based on his choice. A person could choose to hurt me, so he won't be able to hurt me unless Hashem decreed it. But if Hashem decreed it, Hashem will use him to be the vehicle for it. So therefore, the Rasha deserves condemnation, not because he hurt me, but because of his bechira that he wants to hurt me. Similarly, Hakaras HaTov is not for what the person gave me, but for the person's decision that he wants to be meitiv for me, you see? So in that sense, both things exist at the same time. Everything comes from God, but I am makir tov to the people who decided they would be the shaluchim, they would be the vehicles to deliver the hatava. Because if they wouldn't have decided that, you're right, I would have gotten it from somewhere else. That's fine. But lamaisa, they made the decision. And therefore, I'm makir tov. Now, this is an interesting implication because it actually has an interesting implication which I'm not sure if I'm right. If I'm grateful to a person, not because they gave me something, but I'm grateful because of their desire to give me something, then it would appear my hakaras hatov to them should be identical whether they were successful or whether they weren't successful. Let's say somebody wanted to do something nice for me, and they weren't matzliach. Bishlama, if the hakaras hatov would be for what they did for me, they didn't do it. They didn't get the job done. But if we're saying, according to the Chovos HaLevavos, the hakaras hatov is not for what they did for me because they didn't do it. It's only from Hashem. The hakaras hatov is for their ratzon to be meitiv. So even if they failed, that's an interesting point, that even if someone didn't get the job done, you should have an inyan of hakaras hatov for them. So that's something to think of. That's a little bit of a chiddush and the like. But if you're asking me lamaisa, should my amunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu ever take away hakaras hatov to other human beings? The answer is absolutely not. If one is a kafui tov, that is a very, 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 very bad midah. We read kama v'kama stories of Gedolim that they would be makir tov to a great-grandson because when they were 50 years earlier, the great-grandfather did something to them and the like. Though they never forgot any type of taiva, and that's a midah that we should have as well. Yeah.
Why is Olam Haba not mentioned at all in the question itself?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. We say that the main reward of mitzvos is Olam Haba, and that's why I do mitzvahs in this world, and I may not get an immediate reward. Zachar mitzvah b'hayal maleka, the main reward is Olam Haba. And yet, if you look in the Torah, where does it talk about Olam Haba? There are, indirect references that we read into it, but there's certainly no explicit mention of Olam Haba in the Torah at all. We know it from the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im talk about it a little bit, and we know it mainly from Chazal. Gemaras and Midrashim talk a lot about Olam Haba, but not, as you say, in the Torah Shebichsav. So this is a question that the Rishonim ask. In fact, the Kli Yakar, one of the great Perushim on Chumash, in Parshas Bechukosai, gives like 7 or 8 answers about this question. Part of it is the most simplest answer, and that is Olam Haba is something that we don't really understand what it is, because Olam Haba is not a physical place of eating or drinking or the like. It is a purely spiritual pleasure of Devekus B'Hashem, and it is something that a human being wouldn't understand. And Hashem wants to put into the Torah the types of rewards or punishments that motivate me, that incentivize me. So I understand what it means to have famine, to have sickness, to have death, and I understand what it means to have wealth and prosperity and health. So Hashem uses the motivations that Rov B'nai Adam are able to connect to. But those motivations that most people don't fully understand, so that was left kind of Torah Shebaal Peh and the like. So that's a basic answer that basically is based on the Rambam writing it. By the way, a variation on your question, which is a slightly different question, is that if the reward for mitzvahs is in fact Olam Haba, then why does the Torah give you Olam Hazeh rewards? The Torah says if you keep the mitzvahs, you'll get rain and prosperity. So there the Rambam says a beautiful thought. The Rambam says in Hilchos Shuvah that when God promises you prosperity and good things in this world, that's not really reward. That just creates further opportunities to do mitzvahs. Meaning if I give tzedakah, God will give me ashira, so I'll give more tzedakah. So it's not reward, it's opportunity. And that's what Pirkei Avos means when it says, Sechar mitzvah, mitzvah. The reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. It's mamash what the Rambam is saying. God rewards you by giving you more opportunity to do mitzvahs. And chas v'shalom, when a person gets sick or suffers because of averos, that's not the ultimate punishment. The punishment is Gehenna. But God will make it harder for you to do mitzvahs. And therefore, in fact, that might even explain why tzaddikim suffer. Since the purpose of reward of mitzvahs is to give you the kayach to do more mitzvahs, the tzaddik who's going to do more mitzvahs even in his suffering, then fakert, it's better for him to suffer because that way his mitzvahs will count for more. You see, because it's not reward. The reward is only Olam Haba. Yeah.
What date did they write on their shtaris before Hillel created the calendar?
Yeah. What date did they write on shtaros before Hillel created the calendar? Meaning we date, our Hebrew dates are Briat HaOlam, right? Creation. 5,784 from the creation of the world. It's a machlokas. What year are you counting from? Because the way it worked was this. You had 6 days of, you had 5 days of creation. And then on Rosh Hashanah, you had the creation of Adam. So what is year one? Is year one from the creation of Adam? Or is year one the preceding year? Meaning was Adam created in year one, the beginning of year one, and we don't count those other days? Or is Adam created year two? So some say we're 5784, and some say we're actually 5785. It depends on which year you count. But be it as it may, our counting system is from creation. But the truth is there were many, many different counting systems before Hillel and even after Hillel. In the time of the Chashmonaim, they would count to the reign of the kings. They would basically say, and they would change it. They would change it with the different kings. They would say the 25th year of Yochanan the Kohen Gadol, or the reign of a king. In fact, that's what the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says. The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says that when it talks about the 4 Rosh Hashanahs, that one of them is Rosh Hashanah is Nisan, And Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for kings. That means every Nisan would be a new year for a king. And that's Nogeya Shtaros, how you dated Shtaros. So Shtaros were dated Laminyan Malachim, whether it's Malchei Yisrael or Malchei Akum. The Gemara actually says, interestingly enough, for Malchei Yisrael, the change of year is Nisan. For Gaisha kings, the change was Tishrei. And things are dated that way. That's one thing. Or there was something else that you find. You'll often find, if you look in the Rambam, for example, when the Rambam gives dates, which he doesn't do that often, but he mentions different dates, he'll say, so-and-so years from Brias HaOlam, and then he will give another date, and so-and-so years according to the way Shtaros are dated. So it might say, I don't remember the exact correspondence, but it might say the 3,000th year from Brias HaOlam, which is the 250th year from Minyan Shtaros. So what is Minyan Shtaros? Minyan Shtaros was a very common dating system that started counting, strangely enough, from the time that the Seleucid dynasty of Alexander conquered Eretz Yisrael, that became a uniform system of dating. If you remember, when Alexander of Macedonia, Alexander Mokdan, history calls him Alexander the Great, although we don't consider him to be great in a righteous sense. So when Alexander died, his empire was divided among different generals. The Ptolemy dynasty, or Ptolemy took over Egypt and North Africa. Seleucus took over Syria and Turkey. And Eretz Yisrael is right in the middle, and that went back and forth between Ptolemy and Seleucus, civil wars, or wars that were going for a number of years. And at some point, Seleucus from Syria conquered, and that was the Hanukkah story with Antiochus, who was the successor, etc. And from the date of the Seleucid conquest of Eretz Yisrael, they would count Shtaros for hundreds of years. It was never clear to me why that became so important. Even after Antiochus and all those guys were long gone. In the Rambam's time still, they were saying, this is the 500th year, Laminyan Shtaros. So the point is they counted it in many different ways. Brias HaOlam, they counted Matan Torah, they counted from the years of the Chorban, they counted to the years of the king, Jewish and non-Jewish, they counted from some monumental conquest events, right? So there were many, many different ways that years were counted. In fact, al pi halacha, by the way, even today, there is no chiyuv to count Librias HaOlam. If you were to write a ksuva, and you were to date a ksuva X number of years from the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, or whatever it would be kosher. As long as you could figure out what year that is, you can use alternative dating systems. Okay? Yeah.
What's happening when you stand in front of a grave of a tzaddik, and how should we approach our davening?
Yeah, so what happens when you stand in front of the grave of a tzaddik? So this is an important point. The notion of visiting graves of tzaddikim, for many people it's a very big thing. For some people it's not a big thing, and they even say you should avoid it. I'm talking about different Gedolim and the like. But the makor of davening by the grave of a tzaddik is from the Chumash itself, at least Chazal's midrashic interpretation, that when Kalev was sent, together with the other Meraglim, Kalev went to Hebron to be mispalel at the graves of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, right, the Maras HaMachpelah, in order that Hashem should protect him from being nichshal with the Chet of Meraglim. This is a very important makor. This is the makor of going to at least to the graves of the Avos to be mispalel. And this was said to be a makor for kivrei tzadikim, ledoros. Now, the big problem is this. The big problem is it is absolutely forbidden to pray to a tzaddik. A tzaddik does not grant you anything. You only pray to Hashem. You don't pray to anybody else whatsoever. And part of the problem is that sometimes people get mixed up and they think they're actually praying to the tzaddik, which is not right. That's a form of avodah zarah. You don't pray to a dead tzaddik. You only pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, the idea is that some level of the neshama of the tzaddik is somehow connected to the kever, even though he's really in Olam Haba, but there is a spark of his soul that is connected to the kever. And when I die, I am connected to the tzaddik in some way. And what that means is, in the merit of my connection to this holy and pure neshama, HaKadosh Baruch Hu might answer my prayers in the merit of this person, the merit of the tzaddikim. Right? And there is a concept that Hashem answers our tefillas in the merit of tzaddikim. That you actually see in Shemon Esrei itself. The first bracha, Umevi Gayel Livnei V'neihem, Zeicher Chastei Avos. Hashem remembers the loving kindness of the Avos, Umevi Gayel Livnei V'neihem, and he brings redemption to their descendants, L'man Shmo. In other words, the Chastei Avos is a cause of Geula for us, and although once again that's referring to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but it applies to tzaddikim generally. Now, some, as I say, are not in favor of davening by kivrei tzaddikim. A few different reasons. Some have Kabbalistic reasons that you don't go to cemeteries generally because there are shadim or bad spirits in cemeteries. Others say it's too easy to be nichshal into praying to the dead person, which you're not allowed to do. Other people say, an interesting alternative idea, that if you want to connect yourself to a tzaddik, learn the tzaddik's Torah. So instead of going to Meron, learn some Zohar, learn Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's teachings. You connect to the tzaddik not by physical proximity to his body. You connect to a tzaddik by ruchnius and the like. But this is what those who are in favor of it, this is what they would advocate. And they also say, sometimes externally, being in a physical proximity to the tzaddik changes me a little bit, meaning it's not so much the tzaddik, it's I'm different when I'm in the presence of that situation. So I become a different person. So what's interesting is historically, the Ashkenazim, non-Hasidim were not into visiting Kivrei Tzaddikim. But the emes is, truth is, a lot of it changed now. I mean, there were Litvasher Roshei Yeshiva who would go, because now a lot of graves have been restored in Europe after the Holocaust. So you can go to the Vilna Gaon's kever, you can go to the Chafetz Chaim's kever, you can go to the Kavarim of great Tzaddikim. And all of a sudden, the Litvasher are going to Poland, going to Germany, going to Lithuania to visit. Now, in a way, this was foreign to the general behavior of the Litvasher Gedolim, but it became a very important part of them, and it gave them chizuk, and it gave them inspiration, their Talmidim inspiration. So this is not so much of a mystical idea, this is more of being physically connected. I mean, I know myself, I went to Poland once, I was with a seminary. So we visited a lot of different cities, but Krakow was an interesting city. In fact, Krakow, it's very interesting. Jewish Krakow is very fascinating. Krakow was the capital of Nazi-occupied Poland. When the Nazis conquered Poland, Warsaw was not their capital. They made Krakow the capital. Now, Krakow is a beautiful old medieval town with beautiful old buildings. And the governor general, the Nazi, Hans Frank, Yimach Shemo, didn't care about killing Jews. That didn't bother him at all. But he didn't want to destroy the buildings. So he gave an order that no bombs be against the buildings. The Yidden were killed, but not the buildings. So as a result, unlike Warsaw, which was 90% destroyed in World War II, Krakow, all the old shuls were preserved. And they're still preserved. Many of them are not shuls, but they're beautiful, beautiful buildings. One that is a shul is the Ramah's shul, the Beis Knesset of the Ramah, who was the Rav of Krakow, is still preserved. And the Ramah's Makaim is still there. And obviously, you don't sit in that seat. The Ramah's Makaim is still there. And I'm told that even when Hasidim come into the Ramah's shul, they daven Nusach Ashkenaz. He says, What chutzpah would it be for us to go into the Ramah show and daven Svard, like Hasidim daven? They daven Nisach Ashkenaz in the Ramah show because he's a Morid Asra. So I have to say that walking into a show where the Ramah davens, you feel elevated, you feel inspired. And when you go to the graves of the Ramah, which is also in Krakow, and the Taisus Yomtiv and all sorts of Rabbi Kiva Eger, that's in Warsaw already, you feel inspired. So I'm being long-winded here, but the basic idea is there is both a mystical dimension of connection to a neshama, but then there's simply the emotional idea that I become inspired, and therefore it becomes a sechus because I become transformed. It's recorded that anyone who ever davened next to the Vilna Gaon, Shachar, he davened mincha with the Vilna Gaon. He says, that gave you kavana for a whole year. The next year, your davening would have been different because you davened next to the Vilna Gaon. That's what is recorded. Now, that's referring, of course, to somebody who davens next to the Vilna Gaon who was alive. But there are maisim about people who went into the Vilna Gaon shul, 100 years after the Vilna Gaon died. And they felt inspired for months afterwards because there's still kind of a connection there. We don't really understand it. But they felt their davening was different. Their davening was different because they were in the makam of the Vilna Gaon. But you can believe it? The person said, for a year, my davening was on a different... you need a booster shot, so every year you need to go. But my davening was different for an entire year because I davened mincha, just mincha, a weekday mincha, with the Vilna Gaon. Amazing thing. Yeah.
Is brought as a proof for Judaism the success of Jews in various fields, academia, music, etc. Why would Hashem allow people, many of them often derech, to succeed so much in these fields?
Yeah, so the question is, Jews are very successful in many, many fields, art, literature, science, business, making money. They're pretty good at that too. And many of them are bedafka, not religious, and they reject the Torah, or at least they don't know the Torah. Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu give Jews so much hatzlacha in the world? It's a good question. I don't know if I could answer the question, but I would say the following. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Yidden kochos and talents with the understanding that we would turn those talents to Torah and avodas Hashem. And then we make free will. We decide to turn it to Torah or not to turn it to Torah. But Hashem still leaves the talents, so maybe we should be misbainain. Why did God give me such talent? Why do I have such abilities? And then the idea would be that itself could bring me back to Torah. It comes from Torah. It comes from Hashem wanted me to learn Torah. Hashem wanted me to use my mind to serve Him. You see what I'm saying? In other words, the talent that a Jew got in order to learn Torah can also be the mechanism that brings him back to Torah when he realizes this is why Hashem gave him those particular abilities. You see? That I should use them to serve Hashem. And also, I think it also illustrates another aspect, the hashgacha pratis that Hashem has over Am Yisrael, because here you have a nation that all of the great empires of the ancient world wanted to destroy. The Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans. And then during the Middle Ages, we had the Crusades. And then in Spain, we had the Spanish Inquisition. And then we had the Khmelnytsky massacres, the Cossack massacres in the Ukraine, where the Shah and other people tragically died. And then, many other things in between. Then you had the Holocaust. Then you had the terrorism. And this little nation, this little nation is still around. Why are we around? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. If you ask a non-Jew, what percentage, maybe Jews too, what percentage of the world are Jews? They're going to give you a number. Got to be 40, 45% have to be Jews because they're in everything. Well, we're like 1%, less than 1%. But we make a lot of noise, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. So in some ways, the talents and accomplishments of Am Yisrael is actually one of the ways that we know the Hashgacha Pratis in the world. Our existence does not make sense. And when I say existence, I don't mean we're living in a cave in Afghanistan, but existence in being such a force in the world, positive or negative. I mean, listen, we've had our negative forces too. I mean, Karl Marx, all of those guys are Jewish. But whatever it is, they're a koach, right? They're a koach in the world. There was a British historian, Arnold Toynbee. He was quite famous in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and not alive. He's been dead for a number of years. He wrote a multi-volume work called The Study in History, which was a brilliant, brilliant idea. He took 50 ancient civilizations, Sumerians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, all the way to the Romans, right? That's the end of what's called the ancient world. And he tried to collate the information and come up with the laws that determine the rise, the tzad hashava, the common denominators of what determines success and what determines Yerida. And he was able to map it out. Imagine how much data he had to master to show the common features that cause a civilization to rise and cause a civilization to fail. Out of 50 civilizations, his formula worked brilliantly for 49 of them. But the Jewish people were one of his civilizations, and it didn't work, meaning to say, he had said, in order to survive, a civilization has to have common territory. Most of our history, we didn't have it. We weren't living here. Common language. Most of the time, we weren't speaking Hebrew. Now, they say Toynbee was an anti-Semite, but I don't blame him so much. If I wrote a 10,000-page book, and it's miyashev, every nation in the world except for the Jews ruined my theory. Yeah, so if he hated Jews, I get it. Hey, you slug up my whole book. I mean, this was thousands of pages. Okay, so Toynbee concluded that there's no explanation for Jewish survival. He called it a fossil, or like a fossil, like you find an ancient thing. And people argued with him, how can you say that about the Jews? But here's the thing, I think Toynbee is 100% correct. If Toynbee was making the statement that under the laws of history, the way history works, there should not be a Jewish people, the answer is ein hachi nami. There should not be a Jewish people by any type of logical process in the world. Our existence is a miracle. A miracle cannot be explained by processes of history. So when Toynbee says, tzorichian, in a way, he's right. It doesn't fit. So going back to your question, part of why it could be that Jews were given so much hatzlacha is precisely because it doesn't make sense. And therefore people will see the hand of God in preserving the Jewish people. Now this was recognized by non-Jews as well. There's a famous letter, you can look it up in the internet, by Mark Twain. Samuel Clemens was his real name. Mark Twain, famous American author who was not Jewish, was accused at some point of being anti-Semitic. So he wrote a big letter about how great the Jewish people are. And he made exactly this point. He says, he stands back with amazement that all of these nations that ruled over the whole world, the Roman Empire, the whole world, I mean, not America, but the whole known world, and they're gone. People don't realize this. Civilizations go extinct. There is no Rome. I mean, Italy, modern Italians are not ancient Romans. Ancient Romans are gone. Ancient Greeks are gone. Ancient Persians are gone. Civilizations literally disappear. The Chiti, the Amori, the Kanani, they are not in the world anymore. And yet, the little nation that they wanted to destroy, still here. So that's it's one of the proofs that there is a God, and one of the proofs of Hashgacha is the miracle of Jewish survival. And I think that would include the talent that Hashem gave Yidden in the world. Yeah. Did you want to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why why should a bochur in yeshiva keep up with current affairs and how?
Yeah, why should a Bochur in yeshiva keep up with current affairs? The truth is, by and large, I don't think you need to keep up with current affairs. We on one hand, we find among Gedolim that they needed to be aware of things, but only in the most general point. You don't need to read about every debate with Trump and Biden, and does Biden have dementia, and did Trump get hit with a bullet or with glass? L'may nafka mina. I mean, why do I know it? That's a good kasha too. But really, it's not important. It's ultimately not important. Gedolim did make a point of looking at newspaper headlines because that focused their tefillah. Right? If there's an ace tzara for Klal Yisrael, so you want to know what the tzara is in general, so you can daven and be machavein, but you don't need to go into detail so much. It might be a yetzer hara that someone has, so if you're engaged in recreation, this might be a recreational pursuit within the parameters of, permissible recreation. But I would not call it a necessary priority. In other words, I wouldn't say there's some chiyuv. You got to be well informed about current events. Now, if lemaisa, sometimes a gadol needs a little more detailed knowledge, because if you're a person involved in making decisions about how to respond, you need to have more information. So Bochur doesn't need to know as much as maybe a Rosh Yeshiva needs to know, because Rosh Yeshiva would be consulted by people about different decisions. There's an interesting ma'aseh when Rav Mordechai Gifter, Zichrono Livracha, who is the great Rosh Yeshiva of Telz. He's an American-born person. So in the 1930s, Rav Elchanan Wasserman, the Chavetz Chaim's great Talmud, came to America for fundraising. In fact, he went back knowing, after Hitler invaded Poland, he went back knowing that he would die with his yeshiva almost. It's amazing. He could have stayed in America, but he said a captain cannot abandon the ship. But when he was in America, Rav Gifter, who was just a Bochur, went to visit Rav Elchanan Wasserman in a hotel in New York, and he was amazed. He saw Rav Elchanan Wasserman reading a Yiddish newspaper. So he was a little taken aback that one of the Gedolei Hador is just reading a Yiddish newspaper. So Rav Elchanan, of course, he didn't say anything, but Rav Elchanan noticed that he looked a little surprised. So he said to Rav Gifter, "What are you so surprised?" He says, "A Yid has to make time every day to read the paper and to make a siyam hashas every year." He says, you have to, in other words, in addition to your regular learning, you should have two kaviyasas. One is a short read of the paper, and the other is a seder that you finish shas every year. So I would say, if you do the second thing, you can also do the first thing. Read the paper and finish shas every year. You're going to be okay. It's also recorded that the Nitziv of Volozhin, some say this is halachically problematical, every Shabbos he would read many Yiddish newspapers. Of course, every Shabbos he also finished Masechah Shabbos. He finished Masechah Shabbos every week as well. But again, as I say, you can't really bring a raya from either Rabbi Chanan or the Nitziv, because these were Gedolim who had to make actual decisions based on the Metzias. They needed to know the Metzias. You as a Bochur, and even I really, I don't need to know all of the pratei pratim. It's kind of just it's a bittul Torah. But again, as I say, if you're taking a break and you need the break to be healthy or whatever it will be, so this can be a break like other breaks as well. But I wouldn't call it a priority in terms of I will make time to understand the Trump-Biden debate. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
The Kiddushin, marriage, is it Doraita or the Rabbanan? Because we say which sounds like it's the Rabbanan, but there are also Doraita.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, avada, when I marry a woman, the Kiddushin that is created is a Kiddushin da'oraisa. So if she's mazana, she's chayav misa. Now there is a shita that Rashi brings that he does not paskin like, that the only Kiddushin that is da'oraisa is when you're makadesh b'biyah, and if you're makadesh with kesef, which we do, giving a ring, or a shtar, that's only a Kiddushin d'Rabbanan. Rashi brings such an opinion, but Rashi says we do not paskin that way. So lahalacha, all three types of Kiddushin, including the Kiddushin of a ring, which is Kiddushay Kesef, is a Doraisa. But the reason why we say in the formula, you are married to me according to the laws of Moshe, which is the Torah, the Yisrael, the laws of Israel, which refers to the Rabbanan, this is to say, I am making my Kiddushin conditional on the Chachamim agreeing to it. Now, without getting into too much of a technical explanation, the Gemara says in a few cases that there are times where the Chachamim annulled a marriage, not needing a get because of improper behavior. And the Gemara asks the kasha, this is called Hafkinu Rabbanan, L'Kiddushin Minei. And the question is, how can the Rabbanan just get rid of a marriage? And the answer is because when you married, you said this marriage is conditional on the Chachamim agreeing to it. So if they don't agree to it, the marriage is null and void retroactively. So the purpose of the Yisrael thing is to enable Afkinu Rabbanan L'Kiddushin Minei. But it doesn't mean the Kiddushin is midrabanan. The Kiddushin is the Araisa, but it exists only when the Chachamim agree that the Kiddushin should exist. Right? This is called rabbinical annulment. The Gemara in Gittin discusses these circumstances when we say Afkinu Rabbanan L'Kiddushin Minei. Now it's interesting. Some have advocated this as a solution to the aguna problem. What's an aguna? An aguna is a woman whose husband has left her or whatever, and she has a civil divorce. She's been divorced in the court, in the secular court, which doesn't exist in Israel, but let's say in America. But her husband refuses to give her a get. Aguna, she's an anchored woman. She's stuck. She's not allowed to marry. Civilly, she could marry, but under Torah law, until she gets a get, she is married to her first husband, an aguna. Why do men withhold gittin? A few reasons. Sometimes it's blackmail, meaning give me the house and I'll give you a get, or give me $1 million and I'll give you a get. And sometimes it's just cause pain. Sometimes it's sadistic, meaning I don't care what you give me. I'm not going to give you a get because I want you to suffer. So it's a problem. I'm not going to say it's a huge problem numerically. Sometimes in the press they make it out like, hundreds of thousands of women are agunot. The truth is, maybe at any given time, maybe there are 50 agunos in the world. But again, for each individual woman, it can be a very tragic situation. Sometimes this can last for a year. Sometimes it can last for 30 years. I mean, the women are agunos their whole lives. So it's very tragic. So there are many suggestions about what do you do, prenuptial agreements. But one of the hatzaot that was made a long time ago already is that since every Jewish marriage is conditional on the Chachamim being maskim, so why can't we basically make a takana that says that any man who doesn't give a get within 30 days, we were never maskim to the Kiddushin in the first place, and therefore she doesn't need a get. In other words, it's as if this marriage is valid only if I give you a get within 30 days if you're asking for it. So if I don't give you a get within 30 days if you're asking for it, the marriage was never chal. You don't need a get. Based on Afkinu Rabbanan, L'Kiddushin Minei. The big problem is, can modern rabbis do that? Meaning this is not one of the cases where the Gemara said Afkinu Rabbanan. So is Afkinu Rabbanan a fixed category, limited to the specific cases that Chazal gave? Or is Afkinu Rabbanan an expandable category that the Chachamim of each generation can provide different ways in which the Kiddushin could be annulled? That's a huge machlokas, because if you maintain it's an expandable category that the Chachamim of each generation can make new stipulations, then that would be a solution for the aguna problem. You see? In fact, you could even marry a Kohen. You see? When you're mafkia the Kiddushin, that means the Kiddushin was never chal to begin with. So therefore, she's not a divorced woman. She's not a divorcee. She's an unmarried woman that had relations. An unmarried woman that had relations with a Yisrael can marry a Kohen. right? So in some way, she benefits more from Hafkas Kiddushin than she would from a get. But as I say, most poskim say we don't have the koach to expand the category of Hafkas Kiddushin, and therefore that particular avenue for an aguna is not gonna work. But as I say, in terms of the Etzem Kiddushin, the Kiddushin is Doraisa, it's not Rabbanan. Yeah.
If somebody came to you and said, I only want to learn one page of Gemara and I know nothing, what page would you tell them to go learn?
Oh yeah. One page of Gemara. I'd have to think about this. I mean, the truth is, any page is very, very wonderful. I'm gonna have to hold off on it. I want to think about it a little bit. If you only had one page, anyone have an idea? Let's say you've been learning. You haven't learned all of Shas yet, but anyone have a particular page that they love? You can think about it. Maybe next time we'll mention it. You have a potential answer? Yeah.
I actually once asked Rundy from the Mirror in New York the same question.
Yeah. What did he say?
And he said he would start them off with Elu Mitzias, and that would actually also be my answer because I like your Shlomi Das.
Okay. You see how this is subjective. I would not have chosen that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would not have chosen that. Because I think about the fruit over 4 amos does not particularly grab me. But it's interesting. You see how subjective this is. Now, Rav Moshe Feinstein said, generally, the reason why historically the first Maseches kids would learn is Elu Mitzias, he didn't say because it was most interesting Daf and Shas. He said that it's fundamental that kids learn to respect mumminess, that they shouldn't just think Yiddishkeit is about Bein Adam Lamakom, but they have to know how important Bein Adam L'Chaveiro is. So that was I'm wondering if Reb Brittany was going with that cheshbon. I'm just wondering. But I don't know. Let me think about it a little bit. I will tell you an interesting story. With all respect to the Chavetz Chaim yeshivas, which are wonderful, wonderful yeshivas. I'm just going to make a shtickle late sonis, but I don't mean to be sarcastic. Chavetz Chaim learns very, very slowly. It's very famous that they're very thorough, and their Ian is very, very slow. And some people are critical of that because even regular yeshivas that go much faster, Rav Shach said they go too slow. And the Chavetz Chaim is really, really slow. So sometimes people are boasting about how slow they go. So one person said, the whole year we only did one blot. And then a person said, oh, no, the whole year we only did one amud. And then another person said, the whole year we didn't leave the box. Remember, the first word of a Maseches is in a box. Right? We didn't leave the box. But they have maisim about a certain gadol who didn't turn the page. He was reading the same daf over and over and over again. And he said, it's so beautiful, I just don't feel like leaving it. That's the attachment to Torah. And I'll tell you a ma'aseh with Rabbi Yashiv that's fascinating. Rabbi Yashiv, who of course, somebody once asked Rabbi Yashiv how many times he learned through Shas. So Rabbi Yashiv said, whatever number you think, it was more. He said, come up with a number and it was more than you'll come up with. But the story is Rabbi Yashiv learned for many years in a little shul outside of Mea Sharim, Oel Sarah. That was during the day when it wasn't davening, nobody was there. He was all alone. And he locked the door. He had the key and he locked the door and nobody could bother him. But people who wanted to see him, they would knock at the windows, and he wouldn't respond. They would knock, whatever it would be. Because he had in his house times when people could see him, but when he was in Oel Sarah, he would not take any interruptions. People would yell, he would not, this was his shita, he would not stop for anything. But sometimes people would just want to watch him because his back was to the window. So you could stand by the window, and if you had good eyesight, you could see what he was learning, whatever it would be. So after, between Purim and Pesach, he was learning Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Pesach. And a person stood there for 3 hours and noticed that Rav Yashiv was only learning the first page of Hilchos Pesach. He didn't turn the page for 3 hours. Now, if you look at a Shulchan Aruch, the first page of Hilchos Pesach has only one sentence from the Mechaber, although there are commentaries. The sentence is, Shayalin v'darshin behilchos Pesach kodem lePesach shloshim yom. You are supposed to learn and investigate the laws of Pesach 30 days before Pesach. That's all that's on the page. Meaning you actually start on Purim. So he was wondering, what is he looking at for 3 hours? I mean, I would look at it and turn the page like right away. Like there's nothing really there. And yet he was looking at that page for 3 hours. And the person was nispayel. He was amazed. He says, what on earth is he looking at? The answer is, you see, every line of Torah has infinite riches, infinite meaning. You can think about it. You can ask about the implications. I mean, I don't even know exactly what he was thinking about. But this is it. So a person could stay with one daf and keep on. Yeah. Now, Rav Elyashiv didn't only stay with one daf. I mean, as he said, he learned Shas numerous times, as well as Shulchan Aruch numerous times. But afilu hachi, he was able to focus. They say Rabbi Kiva Eger. Rabbi Kiva Eger has the Gilyon Hashas. You know the Gilyon Hashas on the side of the Gemara? Little notes every few, sometimes every daf. It's called Gilyon Hashas. Gilyon Hashas are little marginal notes that Rabbi Kiva Eger made while he was learning. Very short notes. A tzarech iyon, a kasha, a mare makam, he'll refer you to a tshuva. These were not notes for publication. He didn't write this as a sefer. These were notes that he made on the side of his Gemara that were printed after his death. So it is said that the Gilyon Hashas was his Bekiyas Seder. His Bekiyas Seder, they say, although it's hard for me to believe, was 1,000 blot a day. That's a third of Shas every day. That means finish Shas every 3 days. I'm not sure I could believe that because even the Vilna Gaon learned 100 blot a day. The Vilna Gaon finished Shas every month. So I'm not sure I could say Rabbi Kiva Eger finished Shas every 3 days, but be it as it may, he learned quite a lot every day. So when somebody told the Chazon Ish, they were so amazed, the godless of Rabbi Kiva Eger, that he could learn 1,000 blot a day. The Chazon Ish said, that's very, very great. But you know what's even greater? He could learn one blot for 1,000 days. Meaning to say both were true. Both were true. He could do 1,000 blot a day, and he could do one blot over 1,000 days in terms of thinking about it, going over and over and over and again. So both are true. Every single word is beloved to you, but you also have to cover the ground, cover for the basic ideas. Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin, great Rav of Yerushalayim, used to have a shir Motzei Shabbos for B'nai Torah, and Yeshua Leib Diskin was not only a gadol, but he was a genius. He really had an just unusually brilliant person. The stories they tell about him, just his genius was quite amazing. So he would give a 6-hour shir Motzei Shabbos in Gemara, and they spent in Bava Basra, I don't know which Taisus it was, they spent like 6 months, 6-hour shir every time, 6 months on one Tosfos. And after 6 months, they made a siyum, not on the Maseches and not on the Perek. They made the siyum on Tosfos. And people were very happy because, we spent 6 months on one Tosfos. For sure, we know it pretty well. So if Shua Leib Diskin saw it, people were so happy, they were kind of confident that we really know this Tosfos. He says, you think you know this Tosfos? You think you went through everything in this Tosfos? He says, we could spend years and years on this Tosfos. We would not get to the bottom of it. But we have to go on. At some point, we have to go on. So after 6 months, we'll go on. But don't have a hava amina that you have any understanding of this Tosfos. This is how deep the Torah is. But I will give, I was digressing on this, but I'll give some thought about if I only had one blot to choose, what would I choose? Yeah.
What would you recommend to do during Bein Hazmanim?
Yeah, so I have a very simple recommendation. Number one, if you know what Maseches you're going to be doing next month, learn all of the Mishnayos of that Maseches and chazer it at least 4 times. That you should know all of the Mishnayos in that Maseches. So when you begin learning the Gemara, you will have the basic knowledge that will help you learn the sugyas. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be to try to chazer what you learned over the past year, meaning if you learned the old Masechta. So the Mishnayos would be preparation for the new Masechta, and then you would take the old Gemara and chazer that. And or maybe take on a shorter Masechta that's not so difficult that you could enjoy in the summer. So it might be Megillah, it might be Tainus. Again, and I'm not saying any Masechus is easy. No Masechus is really easy, but something that's a little lighter that you're able to do that will give you a geschmack. Okay, so either Chazorah or a new Masechta, or Chazorah and a new Masechta, and but very much do the Mishnayos. I think it'll help you a lot in the coming Zman. Okay, one more question. Yeah.
Why is it that the son of a Kohen has to face the consequences of poor behavior of his father and then lose his Kohen?
Yeah. Why does the son of a Kohen have to suffer consequences? And in particular, just to give the example, which I know you probably are thinking of, if a Kohen marries a divorced woman, which is a sin, he remains a Kohen, but the child is called a Halal. He is desecrated from Kahuna, and he's no longer a Kohen. He's not puzzle. He's not a mamzer. I mean, he can, but he's not a Kohen anymore. Or if a Kohen marries a Gioris, converted woman, same thing. If a Kohen marries a woman that had relations with a Goy, same thing. Meaning, there are a lot of cases where because of the misbehavior of a Kohen, he actually can cause his children to forfeit Kahuna. Very excellent question. Of course, I'll ask you, I think, even a stronger question, and that is, if a Jewish woman commits adultery while she's married to a Jew, the child is much worse than a Chalal. The child is a mamzer, which actually means he can't marry anybody except another mamzer or a ger or a gioret. So there too you have even a more graphic example of the sin of the parents creating an irrevocable defect in the child, right? And intuitively we feel, hey, that's not fair. I mean, doesn't the Torah even say children should not die for the sins of their parents, and parents shouldn't die for the sins of their children? It is a very good question. I'm not sure I have an answer, but one of the lessons is we have to understand that sins are at least as tangible as physical problems. For example, if a man has relations with his wife and one of them has AIDS, HIV, that it may be transmitted to the child, right? So the notion that when I do Averos, it doesn't only affect me, there are consequences, is not only true in the physical world, it's even more true in the spiritual world. See, the reason why we don't like that answer is because we don't look at sin as real as disease. So, well, disease is disease, but sin, God, but the answer is no. Sin is as real as disease, and even more so. And consequently, actions have consequences. And sometimes those actions hurt the innocent people. And maybe that may create a disincentive not to do it. Meaning, if an Avera would only affect me, so I might say, I'll go to hell, I don't care, I'd rather be this thing. But if I'm told this is going to affect my children, then maybe that'll give me a second thought. So it's a kind of system that creates deterrence against sin that might not otherwise exist. Okay, thank you, and have a good Shabbos.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.